Let's talk more about Drew Peterson. In-session correspondents Beth Karras and Jean Casares are with us. In-session contributor and former Peterson trial judge Stephen White also here, and criminal defense attorney Meg Strickler. Beth, let's start with you. How much of his personality, Drew Peterson's, do you think will come out during this trial, with his reactions, with just the way he conducts himself? Do you think that he will have a lot of attention focused on him?
Well, certainly there'll be attention on him. Jurors will be looking at him throughout the trial, but they're not going to see the video of him that the state wanted to introduce making various statements before his arrest. Because he appeared at times with his attorney and because of the high profile of some of the people asking him questions, the judge said the video can't be seen, but a transcript will be given to the jury. A cold transcript is not going to show his attitude, how cavalier he was sometimes. So I don't think, unless he takes the stand, and I suspect if he does do that, he'll be much more controlled. This is a man who knows how to testify. I don't know that the jurors are going to know that Drew Peterson the rest of the world knows.
Judge, a lot of times defendants sit through trials that are only 1, 2, 3 days long. This one will be longer. It's going to be, likely 2 weeks, maybe more, depending on how things go. During that time period, jurors are always looking at the defendant and the attorneys and the judge, of course. But how much do you think in a case like this, where this guy, he seems to always react when he hears something on the stand that he doesn't like? Is he going to be an eye roller, or and if he is that going to work against him?
It could very well work against him, although it could work for him. How does somebody who's innocent react? How does somebody who's guilty react?
Yeah.
And those are perceptions that those jurors are going to be looking at, because, for example, when some of the hearsay statements come in, I'm sure there'll be a couple of jurors who will be, their attention will be focused on him to see how he reacts. How would an ex-husband react when the facts of the death of the ex-wife come up? How would, when Stacy comes up, how is he going to react to that? So, there's going to be some key moments there where people are going to be looking. Likewise, on each side, you're going to have people on the defense team as well as the state team watching for reactions of the jurors, because those are points that you can then emphasize when it comes to closing argument or maybe future witnesses that come up. Because if a juror reacts to it and you start to highlight it, if you latch on one juror at a time until you get them all 12 convinced. So,
Meg, when you have a client like Drew Peterson, what do you tell him? How would you, if you were the lead defense attorney in this case, what would you tell Drew Peterson to act like, if you will, in court as this proceeds?
I am confident these 5 defense attorneys have spent hours upon hours, like I do with my clients when I go to trial, counseling them how to behave in a courtroom. There's a couple of things you need to do in court no matter what, and that's respecting the judge. Yes sir, no sir, we know that. But then also sitting upright, being confident in how he stands and sits, and whenever the judge walks in and out of the courtroom, Mr. Peterson needs to get up and down. These are all basic things we tell our clients, but also more importantly, the biggest thing I tell my clients is, look, here's a pad, here's a pen, write down your emotions. Scribble hard. Don't show it, but go ahead and tell me what is bothering you, and then hand the piece of paper, the pad, over to me, and then we will address it. Do not do any body movements that are indicative of your feelings. I go through it up and down and around and around. So will these 5 defense attorneys. I am convinced, but as we have all seen in all the trials that we do see on Tru TV, is that you see that our emotions take over us. So there'll be times where Mr. Peterson may not behave correctly. There's another thing I tell my clients, I elbow them in the ribs or I step on their toes. There are things that I can do to keep my client controlled as best I can, and that's what will happen here also.
But
go ahead, Judge.
Okay, there are ways to where you can, without even taking the stand, you can almost testify from that defense counsel table, and even with the state. You can communicate to a jury, depending on if there's an objection, how you react to it. When a witness says something, how does Drew react to it? And if the jurors are watching him do that, he can convey emotions, he can convey things to the jury without ever taking that witness stand.
And Jean Casares, do you think it's a safe bet that we are going to see some emotion out of this defendant?
You know, I think the judge makes a very good point. When the hearsay statements come in before the jury, he may not be able to withstand just an emotion or a head movement or a hand movement. On the other hand, he's been coached, obviously, and he's a smart man. I think Drew Peterson is smart, and he's going to know that the day of reckoning is here. So what do? Do you make a public statement to show how you feel, or do you not, based that it could weigh against you? I guess only he can make that determination, but we will let you know because we will be in that courtroom.
Absolutely, we'll be there from start to finish. Both Gene and Beth will be there providing us with minute-to-minute updates. Judge, the bottom line here is, to your point, where a defendant can communicate and maybe should communicate with a jury. And do you take on the persona of as a wrongly convicted man and you're angry, or what would you advise him, because you're a defense attorney now, if you were the attorney for him, how would you want him to conduct himself?
Well, you'd want him to conduct himself in a natural way, which is for him, because the trial is going to be so long. They'll pick up what his personality is. What you don't want is, you don't want false emotions, because if a jury catches a false emotion coming out of there and thinks it's a false emotion, that can be held against them.
Absolutely. And Meg, you would rather he just writes and looks down and is engaged but doesn't show emotion. Is that accurate? You don't want him to... Why?
Exactly.
Why not play the role of a guy that's wrongly accused and do roll your eyes when somebody gets up there and says something that you think is wrong?
Listen, I want to control everything I can when I'm in the courtroom, so I try my darndest to keep my client just sedentary and doing nothing as best I can. But remember who we're dealing with here. Drew Peterson loves to talk, loves to be the focus of attention. He will not follow the rules that are given to him and has been coached, as I said, many, many hours. The thing is that he will make some gaffes, we all do, but I want to point out, he's a police officer. What kills me when I do my trials is these police officers are so good on the stand. They have taken courses on how to testify and how to behave in courtrooms, body language, all these other things. That adds an extra dimension to this case because Mr. Peterson is familiar with the courtroom and all the various things that go into a trial beyond the basics, direct examination and whatnot. That's going to make this one interesting also.
Absolutely. And Beth Karras, do you think we're going to see him on the stand? Obviously, it'll be a last-minute decision, but it's definitely on the table, I would think.
Well, I don't know about that. Maybe. We did have somebody, I think Sam Adams from Chicago, thought that Drew Peterson would testify. He's a very well-respected defense attorney in Chicago, and he was talking to us last week about that. I guess it's possible. This is a case that kind of cries out for him to testify, but I don't know everything that the state has in its arsenal that he could be cross-examined on, and he may not want to be exposed to certain questioning by the state. However, it may be worth putting him on. We'll just have to see how things shake out. I mean, if the defense does a good job cross-examining the state's case, I mean, they're going to make a vigorous motion for a directed verdict at the end of the state's case, and maybe they'll feel that they weakened the state's case enough they don't need to put him on.
That's a good point, and Judge, it brings up another one. Should they have gone with a bench trial in this one? Because the emotion that does, or the prosecutors hope the emotion that comes into this case could affect it. A bench trial would pull that out. You know, you'd put the seasoned veteran in a position to make that decision. Would you have gone that route? Or is that too much pressure on one person, resident here in Joliet?
That's a risky decision when you have one person who's going to make the decision. With the jury, you know, you can have a not guilty, you could have a guilty where it takes 12 out of 12, but you could also have a hung jury.
Right.
Okay, and a hung jury will give you a pretty good idea. For example, if it was 10-2 not guilty, that tells you pretty much about the state's case. If it was 10-2 guilty, then that tells you pretty much about the defense strategy that's there. Whereas if you have a judge, the judge's going to sit there, he can filter through all the things that may have been inadmissible or got put in. He's not going to pay as much attention to Drew's reaction to certain witnesses. He's going to listen to the witnesses, keep his eyes and attention focused on the evidence, and make that decision. So that's a risky one, but you know, again, that's one decision that the defendant has, and that was Drew's decision. So
not to do that. All right. Well, coming up in Sessions, Vinnie Politan's got a chance to speak with Joseph Hosey, the author of Fatal Vows, The Tragic Wives of Sergeant Drew Peterson. Hosey says he suspected Peterson in his wife's death from the very beginning. That's coming up. Stay with us.